Sometimes the people closest to disappearing are the ones who quietly save someone else first. The storm rolled across northern Montana like a living thing, dragging sheets of freezing rain over the empty highway outside Dalton Creek. Wind rattled the rusted mailbox beside Lily Harper's trailer hard enough to keep her awake long after midnight. The old heater near the kitchen coughed weakly every few minutes, barely warming the tiny living room where unpaid bills sat scattered across the table beside a cold cup of instant coffee. Lily sat curled beneath a faded gray blanket, staring at the flickering television without seeing any of it. Outside, pine trees bent beneath the storm, their shadows scraping across the trailer windows like skeletal hands. She had worked 10 hours straight at the roadside diner that day for $73 and a free bowl of soup she never touched. Her body ached. Her eyes burned from exhaustion. But none of it hurt as much as the silence. The kind that waits for you when there's nobody left to call your name. A soft scratching sound suddenly broke through the storm. Lily frowned slowly. Another scratch came from outside the front door. Weak. Uneven. Almost desperate. She reached for the flashlight beside the couch and stood carefully, her socks brushing the freezing floorboards. The scratching stopped for a second. Then came one low whine. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just tired. Lily opened the door halfway, an icy wind immediately rushed into the trailer carrying the scent of wet earth, pine sap, and snow. At first she saw nothing except darkness and rain. Then two amber eyes caught the porch light. A German shepherd stood trembling at the edge of the steps, soaked completely through, his sable coat matted with mud and sleet. One front leg dragged slightly behind him, and his chest rose in shallow breaths. The dog didn't bark. He simply stared at her with an expression so painfully human it made Lily freeze. "Oh my God," she whispered. The shepherd stepped forward once, then turned his head toward the darkness beyond the trailer as if asking her to follow. Lily hesitated. Common sense told her to shut the door. People disappeared in storms like this. Strangers brought trouble. Trouble brought debt, police, hospitals, questions she couldn't afford. But the dog looked back again, and something in those eyes shattered the wall she had spent years building around herself. She grabbed her coat and followed him into the storm. Rain soaked through her jeans within seconds as the dog limped ahead through muddy grass behind the trailer lot toward a line of pine trees. The flashlight beam shook in her hand. "Easy, boy," she called softly. "Slow down." The shepherd stopped beside a shallow ditch near the tree line. That was when Lily saw him. A man lay half against a fallen log beneath the rain, motionless except for the faint rise of his chest. Dark blood stained the shoulder of his jacket. One hand still gripped the strap of a weathered military backpack. Even in the storm, Lily could see the hardened build beneath his soaked clothes, the close-cropped dark hair plastered against his forehead, the exhaustion carved deep into his face. The dog immediately moved beside him, pressing protectively against the stranger's body while staring at Lily with desperate urgency. As thunder rolled across the mountains, Lily knelt beside the wounded man and pressed trembling fingers against his neck. A pulse. Weak, but there. The stranger's eyes barely opened for half a second, cloudy with pain and exhaustion. His lips moved once. "Rex," he whispered hoarsely. The dog lowered his head against the man's chest without looking away from Lily. And in that moment, standing in the freezing Montana rain with a wounded stranger and a dying dog staring at her like their last piece of hope, Lily Harper realized something terrifying. For the first time in months, she no longer felt completely alone. The trailer door slammed shut against the storm, and for a moment the tiny room filled only with the sound of rain hammering the metal roof overhead. Lily dropped Ethan's arm across her shoulders and struggled to keep him upright as they stumbled inside. He was heavier than he looked, solid with the kind of strength built through years of discipline, though now that strength hung loose beneath exhaustion and pain. Water pooled beneath their boots onto the worn linoleum floor while the old heater rattled harder in the corner like it was fighting to stay alive with them. Rex followed close behind, limping slightly but refusing to leave Ethan's side even for a second. The dog's wet fur carried the scent of pine, mud, and cold mountain air into the trailer. Lily guided Ethan onto the small couch beneath the window. The moment she tried stepping back, his hand caught her wrist with startling speed. His blue-gray eyes opened halfway, sharp despite the fever burning behind them. "Who are you?" he asked, voice rough and low. Lily swallowed. "Lily Harper." His grip loosened slowly. "Not trust. Just exhaustion winning the fight." Rex immediately positioned himself beside the couch, amber eyes fixed on Lily with tense caution. The German shepherd's chest rose heavily as if he had been running for miles through the storm. Lily grabbed every towel she owned from the bathroom and knelt beside Ethan carefully. Up close, she could see the deep bruise darkening his jawline and the soaked blood around his shoulder beneath the torn jacket. Her stomach tightened. "You need a hospital." Ethan let out a weak breath that almost sounded like a humorless laugh. "No hospitals. You could have an infection." "No hospitals," he repeated quietly. The firmness in his voice ended the conversation. Lily stared at him for a second before sighing softly and disappearing into the kitchen. The trailer smelled faintly of canned soup, old wood, and rain-soaked clothes drying near the heater. She filled a pot with water and set it on the stove while thunder rolled across the valley outside. Behind her, Rex had not moved. The dog watched every motion she made, every cabinet she opened, every step she took. "You can relax," she whispered gently without turning around. "I am trying to help him." Rex lowered his head slightly but remained alert. 20 minutes later, Lily sat beside Ethan with a first aid kit balanced on her knees. The cut near his shoulder was not as deep as she feared, but the skin around it burned hot beneath her fingers. Ethan stayed silent while she cleaned the wound carefully. He barely reacted to pain. That frightened her more than anything. Most people winced. Most people complained. This man looked like someone who had learned long ago that suffering changed nothing. Rainwater slid slowly down the trailer windows while Lily wrapped fresh bandages around his shoulder. "You military?" she asked quietly. Ethan stared toward the dark ceiling for a long moment before answering. "Used to be. Army? Navy." His eyes drifted toward Rex. "He is the only reason I made it this far." At the sound of Ethan's voice softening slightly, Rex finally relaxed enough to rest his head against the couch cushion beside him. Lily looked at the dog carefully, then back at the man. Something about the way they stayed close felt deeper than training. It looked like survival. She stood and handed Ethan a steaming bowl of soup a few minutes later. He hesitated before taking it. "You should not trust strangers this easily," he muttered. Lily leaned against the counter, folding her arms tightly against the cold. "Funny," she said softly. "I was thinking the same thing about you." For the first time since entering the trailer, the corner of Ethan's mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. Just the faint memory of one. Outside, the storm kept raging across the mountains, but inside the tiny trailer, something quieter had begun. 3 wounded souls sitting beneath one flickering light, pretending they were not already starting to save each other. The storm finally weakened sometime after 3 in the morning, but sleep never truly reached the trailer. Wind still whispered through cracks in the old walls, carrying the distant scent of wet pine and frozen earth across Dalton Creek. The heater rattled unevenly beside the couch where Ethan lay half awake beneath a stack of faded blankets Lily had pulled from the closet. Every few minutes his eyes drifted toward the front window, then toward the door, then toward Rex. Always checking. Always listening. Lily noticed it from the kitchen table where she sat pretending to sort overdue bills beneath the weak yellow light overhead. Men who felt safe did not scan rooms like that. Men who felt safe actually slept. Rex remained curled beside the couch, though one ear stayed alert even while resting. The German shepherd's breathing had finally slowed, but any time Ethan shifted even slightly, the dog's eyes opened instantly. Lily wrapped both hands around a chipped coffee mug, staring at the numbers printed across the unpaid notices spread before her. Past due. Final warning. Disconnect notice. Her landlord's handwriting circled in red ink across the top envelope waiting nearest the edge of the table. She folded it shut before Ethan could see. Outside, an 18-wheeler groaned down the highway somewhere beyond the trees. Ethan's eyes opened immediately. Instinct. His hand moved under the blanket toward something near the couch before stopping when he realized where he was. Lily caught the motion. "You expecting someone?" she asked softly. Ethan stayed quiet for a moment. The silence stretched long enough for rainwater to drip steadily from the kitchen sink into a metal pan below. "No," he finally answered. "That is usually when trouble shows up." Lily gave a tired half-smile. "You always this cheerful?" "Used to be worse." That almost made her laugh. Almost. She stood and walked carefully toward the couch carrying a fresh towel and a bottle of pain medication from the bathroom cabinet. Up close, Ethan looked older in the low light. Not old in years. Old in weight. The kind carried inside a person long after the world stops noticing. A faint scar crossed the bridge of his nose. Another disappeared beneath the collar of his thermal shirt. His hands were rough and marked from years of work that had nothing to do with offices or normal lives. Rex watched Lily carefully as she handed Ethan the pills. "You can trust her," Ethan murmured quietly to the dog. The shepherd's ears lowered slightly at the sound of his voice. Lily blinked. "Does he actually understand you?" "Better than most people ever did." Ethan swallowed the medication dry and leaned back slowly against the couch cushion. His face tightened briefly from pain before settling again into that same guarded calm. Lily sat carefully in the armchair nearby. The trailer suddenly felt smaller with another heartbeat inside it. Stranger still. It felt less empty. "So what happened to you?" she asked after a while. Ethan stared toward the frost gathering along the window corners. "Bad mission. Military. Something like that." His answers came short and flat, like doors closing one by one. Lily nodded slowly. She understood that kind of silence. Some pain only survived by staying buried. A long quiet settled between them while the storm faded deeper into the mountains. Then Rex suddenly stood. Not aggressive. Alert. The German shepherd walked away from Ethan for the first time all night and stopped beside Lily's chair. Slowly, carefully, he lowered his head onto her knee. Lily froze. Ethan looked genuinely surprised. "He does not usually do that," he admitted softly. Lily hesitated before resting trembling fingers against the thick fur behind Rex's ears. The dog closed his eyes for a second as if exhausted beyond words. Something inside her chest tightened painfully. It had been months since another living thing touched her with trust instead of obligation. She looked down at the shepherd while thunder rumbled faintly somewhere far away. "You both picked a terrible place to hide," she whispered. Ethan watched her quietly from the couch. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it was the last place nobody would think to look." Morning arrived quietly over Dalton Creek, washing the mountains in pale silver light that filtered through thinning clouds and frost-covered pine branches. The storm had passed, but cold still clung stubbornly to the valley like grief that refused to leave. Inside the trailer, the heater hummed weakly while the scent of coffee and canned soup drifted through the tiny kitchen. Lily stood by the stove wearing an oversized gray sweater and thick wool socks, staring absently at snow melting along the window glass. For the first time in weeks, the silence inside the trailer did not feel suffocating. Behind her, Ethan sat upright on the couch with a blanket across his lap while Rex rested near his boots. The dog looked stronger after food and warmth, though exhaustion still lingered in his amber eyes. Ethan watched the front window carefully while flexing his injured shoulder with restrained discomfort. You should still be resting, Lily said softly without turning around. Rest gets people killed. That sounds exhausting. Ethan glanced toward her, and for half a second something gentler moved behind his guarded expression. You get used to it. Lily carried a steaming mug toward him. Their fingers brushed briefly as he accepted it. His hands were cold despite the warmth inside the trailer. Outside, tires crunched slowly over frozen gravel somewhere beyond the trees. Rex's ears immediately lifted. Ethan's posture tightened at the exact same moment. Lily noticed both reactions instantly. Relax, she said quietly after peeking through the curtain. Just old Mr. Talbot checking mailboxes. Ethan did not fully relax. Men trained for danger rarely did. A small battery radio crackled softly on the kitchen counter while Lily rinsed dishes. Local weather updates faded into morning news headlines. Then the announcer's voice shifted. Authorities continue searching for former Navy Special Warfare operative Ethan Cole following last week's classified transport incident near Helena. Officials have not released additional details but described Cole as highly trained and potentially dangerous. The plate slipped from Lily's hands and clattered loudly into the sink. Silence filled the trailer. Slowly, she turned toward the couch. Ethan's eyes remained fixed on the radio. Not surprised. Just tired. Rex stood carefully beside him. Navy SEAL, Lily whispered. Ethan looked down into the coffee mug resting between his hands. Former. They said dangerous. Depends who is telling the story. Lily studied him quietly. The man sitting on her couch looked exhausted, wounded, and barely able to keep himself standing. Nothing about him felt dangerous now except the sadness buried behind his eyes. What happened? She asked softly. Ethan remained silent long enough for the radio host to move on to another story. Finally he spoke without looking at her. Something went wrong. That is not an answer. A faint shadow crossed his face. It is the only one I can give you. Lily wanted to press harder, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way his hand unconsciously rested near Rex while he spoke. Maybe it was the exhaustion in his voice. Or maybe she recognized the sound of someone carrying blame too heavy to explain out loud. She turned the radio off instead. Quiet returned to the trailer. Outside, snow dripped steadily from the roof edges beneath the weak morning sun. Ethan rubbed one hand slowly across Rex's neck. You should not keep helping me, he said quietly after a while. People around me tend to lose things. Lily stared at the stack of overdue notices sitting on the kitchen table. The shut-off warnings. The debt collectors. The eviction notice folded beneath them all. Then her eyes drifted toward the hallway bathroom where a small orange prescription bottle sat hidden inside the medicine cabinet beside a folded goodbye letter nobody had ever read. She swallowed carefully before answering. Maybe some of us already did. Ethan looked up then. Really looked at her for the first time since entering the trailer. Something passed silently between them in that moment. Not trust yet. But recognition. Two people standing at different edges of the same darkness. Rex slowly walked across the room and rested his head against Lily's hand again. Outside, the winter wind moved softly through the pines while inside the trailer, none of them noticed the dark SUV parked briefly along the distant roadside beyond the trees before disappearing again into the mountains. That evening the temperature dropped hard across Dalton Creek, turning the road silver with ice beneath a fading orange sky. Pine smoke drifted from distant cabins while the mountains darkened into long shadows beyond the valley. Lily stood behind the counter of Mason's diner tying her apron tighter around her waist as tired country music crackled softly from an old jukebox near the door. The dinner rush had already passed. Only two truckers remained inside nursing coffee beside the window while snow flurries drifted lazily beneath the neon sign outside. Normally Lily hated the quiet hours because silence gave her thoughts too much room to breathe. But tonight her mind stayed back at the trailer. Back with the wounded stranger sleeping on her couch and the German. shepherd who watched her like he understood things nobody else noticed. "You look distracted," old Martha Benson muttered while wiping down menus near the register. Martha owned the diner and had worked there longer than Lily had been alive. Her gray curls bounced slightly whenever she spoke, and years of cigarette smoke had roughened her voice into something strangely comforting. Lily forced a small smile. "Just tired." Martha studied her carefully over the top of her glasses. "Honey, tired and lonely are two different things." Lily looked away before answering. Outside the diner windows, headlights swept slowly across the parking lot. A dark SUV rolled past the building once. Then again a few minutes later. Lily frowned slightly. Small towns noticed unfamiliar vehicles. Something about that one made the air inside her chest tighten. Back at the trailer, Ethan sat quietly near the front window wrapped in a thermal shirt and worn flannel blanket while Rex rested beside the door. The dog had barely left his side all day. Snow tapped softly against the glass while the old heater hummed unevenly nearby. Ethan stared out toward the dark tree line beyond the trailer lot, his instincts refusing to settle. Years of training had taught him to notice patterns before danger arrived. The same SUV had passed twice already. Rex suddenly lifted his head. A low growl vibrated deep in the dog's chest. Ethan's eyes narrowed instantly. "What is it?" he whispered. Rex walked slowly toward the window, ears rigid now, amber eyes locked toward the road outside. Ethan carefully shifted the curtain just enough to look out. Nothing but snow and darkness. Yet the feeling remained. Heavy. Wrong. Rex never reacted without reason. Ethan trusted that dog more than he trusted memory itself. 30 minutes later Lily finally returned home carrying leftover soup in a paper bag beneath one arm. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she climbed the trailer steps. Before she even reached the door, Rex appeared at the window. Alert. Waiting. The moment she stepped inside, Ethan stood slowly from the couch. "Did anyone follow you?" Lily blinked in surprise. "What?" "Dark SUV. Possibly black Chevy. Tahoe. Tinted windows." Lily's stomach tightened immediately. "I saw one near the diner." Ethan's jaw hardened slightly. Rex paced once toward the front door, growling again beneath his breath. Lily set the soup down carefully. "Who are these people?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked toward the window where snow continued falling in slow silence beneath the porch light. "People who do not like loose ends." The answer chilled her more than the weather outside. For a long moment none of them spoke. Then Lily noticed something strange. Rex had moved beside her again instead of Ethan. The German shepherd pressed close against her leg protectively, watching the door with sharp unwavering focus. Ethan saw it too. "He thinks you are in danger now," he said softly. Lily swallowed hard. "Because of you?" Ethan's eyes lowered briefly. "Because you helped me." Outside, somewhere beyond the frozen trees, headlights appeared again for only a moment before disappearing into the snowfall. Inside the trailer, the heater rattled softly while three souls sat beneath one weak light, all beginning to understand the same terrifying truth. Whatever Ethan had escaped from had finally found Dalton Creek. Snow continued falling through the night, covering Dalton Creek in a heavy silence that made the world feel abandoned by time itself. The trailer windows fogged faintly from the weak heater while shadows moved softly across the walls from the flickering lamp near the couch. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor beside the coffee table pretending to organize bills she could no longer pay. Across from her, Ethan cleaned mud from Rex's paws with slow careful movements while the German shepherd rested his heavy head against Ethan's knee. The simple gentleness in the scene felt strangely out of place against the fear hanging quietly in the room. Outside, the wind whispered through the pine trees like distant voices. "You should leave before morning," Ethan finally said without looking up. Lily kept sorting papers for a moment before answering. "And go where?" Ethan stayed silent. There was no good answer to that question. The bank already owned most of what surrounded her. The trailer was 3 months behind on payments. Her truck barely started anymore. The diner paid enough to survive another week at a time and nothing more. She laughed softly under her breath, though there was no humor in it. Funny thing about losing everything, she murmured. Eventually there is nowhere left to run to. Ethan glanced toward her carefully. The exhaustion in her voice sounded familiar. Too familiar. Rex slowly lifted his head and walked toward Lily again. The dog settled heavily beside her feet this time, pressing warm fur against her leg while watching her face with quiet concern. Lily scratched behind his ears absent-mindedly, and for the first time in years her eyes began to sting. "My little brother used to do that," she whispered suddenly. Ethan frowned slightly. "Do what?" "Stay close whenever he knew I was sad." Her fingers tightened gently in Rex's fur. Connor was 10 when he got sick. The heater rattled softly while snow tapped against the roof overhead. Ethan listened without interrupting. "Leukemia," Lily continued quietly. "Mom was already gone by then. Dad drank himself to death 2 winters later. So it was just me and Connor in that trailer trying to survive on canned soup and prayers that never seemed to reach anybody." Her voice cracked slightly before steadying again. "I worked double shifts. Sold my father's tools. Sold my mother's jewelry. But treatment costs do not care how hard you love someone." Ethan lowered his eyes. Lily stared toward the dark kitchen window where her reflection looked pale and tired beneath the dim light. "Connor used to tell me not to cry in front of him because it made him feel guilty for being sick." She smiled weakly through wet eyes. 10 years old and trying to comfort me. Rex rested his head gently against her lap as if he understood every word. Ethan sat motionless for a long moment before speaking quietly. "I am sorry." Lily shook her head slowly. "He died 3 years ago." The words came out flat now. Worn thin by repetition and loneliness. "Ever since then it feels like life just kept shrinking smaller and smaller until all I had left was work, debt, and empty rooms." Ethan looked toward her carefully. "And tonight?" Lily's eyes drifted briefly toward the hallway bathroom. Toward the hidden orange prescription bottle inside the medicine cabinet. Toward the folded goodbye letter she had written before the storm arrived. Her throat tightened. "Tonight was supposed to be my last night here," she admitted softly. Silence filled the trailer completely. Even the heater seemed quieter after those words. Ethan stared at her as though something inside him had suddenly stopped breathing. Rex immediately lifted his head higher against her lap, whining softly beneath his breath. Lily wiped quickly at her face, embarrassed now. "I know that sounds pathetic." "No," Ethan said firmly. "It sounds like someone who got tired of hurting alone." The honesty in his voice broke something open inside the room. Lily looked at him for a long moment while snow continued falling outside the trailer walls. Ethan slowly reached down and rested one hand against Rex's neck. "You know why he brought me to your door?" he asked quietly. Lily shook her head. Ethan looked toward the German shepherd beside her. "Because sometimes dogs notice the people disappearing long before humans do." The trailer stayed quiet for a long time after Lily's confession, the kind of silence that only appears when 2 strangers suddenly stop pretending they are fine. Snow drifted softly beyond the windows, covering Dalton Creek beneath a pale layer of white while the weak porch light flickered against the storm-dark trees. Rex remained pressed close against Lily's side, his steady warmth grounding her in a way words never could. Ethan sat motionless on the couch staring down at his rough scarred hands as though replaying old ghosts only he could see. Finally he spoke, his voice low and distant. "I lost men under my command once." Lily looked up slowly. Ethan's eyes never left the floor. "Good men. Husbands. Fathers. One of them had a little girl who used to send him drawings every month while we were overseas. His jaw tightened briefly. After the mission failed, I had to knock on her door and explain why her father was not coming home. The heater rattled softly beside them. Ethan swallowed once before continuing. People think soldiers get haunted by war because of what they see. Truth is, it is usually because of who they could not save. Lily watched him carefully. The exhaustion in his voice sounded heavier than injury. "What happened?" she asked gently. Ethan leaned back slowly, staring toward the dark ceiling. Official report said it was enemy fire. He let out a humorless breath. Official reports lie sometimes. Rex lifted his head slightly at the tension in Ethan's voice. "Somebody sold our location," Ethan continued quietly. "Men died because somebody wanted money more than loyalty." His eyes drifted toward the snow-covered window. "I made it out. Most did not." Lily suddenly understood the look he carried everywhere. Not fear. Guilt. The kind that sits inside a person until they stop believing they deserve warmth anymore. "And now they are after you?" Ethan nodded once. "Loose ends." Outside, wind moved softly through the trees. Then Rex stood abruptly. Every muscle in the German shepherd's body tightened at once. His ears shot forward. A low growl vibrated deep in his chest. Ethan was already moving before Lily could speak. The former SEAL crossed silently toward the front window and shifted the curtain barely half an inch. Two headlights sat motionless beyond the distant tree line near the road. Watching. Waiting. Lily's breathing slowed painfully. "Is that them?" she whispered. Ethan did not answer immediately. He kept staring toward the lights while Rex positioned himself directly in front of Lily protectively. "Get the lamps off," Ethan said quietly. Lily immediately moved through the trailer, turning off lights until only the dim kitchen glow remained. Darkness folded around the tiny home. Outside, the headlights disappeared for a second. Then slowly began moving again. Closer this time. Snow crunched faintly somewhere beyond the trees. Lily's pulse hammered against her ribs. "What do we do?" Ethan's eyes stayed fixed on the window. "Stay calm." The trailer suddenly felt unbearably small. Every sound became sharp. The ticking heater. The wind. Rex's low growl. Then came 3 slow knocks at the front door. Not loud. Somehow that made them worse. Lily froze completely. Ethan stepped in front of her instinctively despite the pain still pulling at his injured shoulder. Another knock echoed through the trailer. Calm. Patient. "Miss Harper," a man's voice called gently through the door. "Road conditions are dangerous tonight. We are looking for someone who may need medical assistance." Ethan's expression hardened instantly. He leaned closer to Lily without taking his eyes off the door. "Do not answer." Rex's growl deepened. The stranger outside waited several seconds before speaking again. "Ma'am, if there is a wounded man inside with you, you could be in serious danger." Lily looked toward Ethan. Snowlight reflected faintly across his tired face while the German shepherd stood ready beside him. For the first time since Connor died, someone was standing between her and the darkness instead of walking away from it. Then Ethan reached slowly into his jacket pocket and placed a folded photograph into Lily's trembling hands. In the dim kitchen light she saw 4 smiling Navy men standing beside a military helicopter. 3 of them had black memorial ribbons drawn carefully across their faces. Only Ethan remained untouched. The photograph trembled slightly in Lily's hands while the knocks at the door stopped altogether. Outside, snow drifted silently through the darkness beneath the weak porch light. The trailer felt suspended in time, balanced between fear and something deeper neither of them could name yet. Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the door while Rex stood rigid beside him, every muscle prepared for danger. Lily looked down again at the worn photograph. 4 men smiling beneath desert sunlight. Brothers, not soldiers. She could see it in their faces. One of them held a German Shepherd puppy against his chest. Another had his arms slung around Ethan's shoulder. The black ribbons crossing three faces suddenly felt unbearably cruel. "They were your team," she whispered. Ethan nodded once. "Best men I ever knew." "What were their names?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Daniel Mercer. Luis Ortega. Ben Holloway." He swallowed carefully. They all had families waiting for them. Snow tapped softly against the trailer roof, while silence settled between them again. Outside, tires crunched faintly beyond the road. The SUV was still there. Waiting. Watching. Ethan slowly exhaled through his nose. "You should go into the back room," he said quietly. Lily looked up immediately. "No, Lily. No," her voice shook but held firm. "I spent 3 years letting fear make every decision for me. I am done hiding in rooms waiting for life to end." Ethan stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his tired eyes. Then Rex suddenly stepped away from the door. Not toward Ethan. Toward the hallway bathroom. The German Shepherd stopped outside the half-open door and whined softly. Lily froze. Her heartbeat slowed painfully as she realized what was inside. Ethan followed the dog's gaze. Slowly, carefully, he walked toward the bathroom while Lily remained motionless near the kitchen table. Rex nudged the cabinet door lightly with his nose. Ethan opened it. Inside sat the orange prescription bottle beside the folded goodbye letter Lily had written before the storm. The trailer fell completely silent. Ethan picked up the letter slowly but did not open it. He simply stared at the folded paper for several seconds while pain crossed his face in a way no physical wound had managed to create. Behind him, Lily lowered her eyes in shame. "I was tired," she whispered weakly. "I know." Ethan's voice came soft now. "Human. You know what the strange thing about survival is?" He turned toward her holding the folded letter carefully in one hand. "People think it happens all at once. Big moment. Big miracle." His eyes drifted briefly toward Rex sitting quietly between them. "Most of the time it is smaller than that." Snowlight reflected softly across the trailer walls while the old heater hummed beside them. Ethan stepped closer. "Sometimes survival is just making it through one more night because somebody stayed." Lily's eyes filled instantly. No speeches. No pity. Just truth spoken by someone who understood what darkness looked like up close. Outside, headlights suddenly flashed brighter through the front window. The SUV had moved closer to the trailer lot. Rex growled sharply this time. Ethan immediately handed Lily the photograph and the folded letter together. "Listen to me carefully," he said calmly. "Whatever happens next, none of this is your fault." Lily shook her head quickly. "I do not care about fault anymore." Her voice cracked softly. "I just do not want to lose another person." Something inside Ethan visibly broke at those words. The former SEAL looked away for a second, jaw tightening hard against emotions he clearly no longer knew how to carry. Then Rex walked directly between them and rested his head against both their hands at once. The simple gesture stopped the room cold. 3 broken souls connected by one silent animal who somehow understood exactly what they needed before they did. Outside, a car door opened somewhere beyond the falling snow. But inside the tiny trailer near Dalton Creek, something stronger than fear had finally begun to grow. None of them were alone anymore. The snow finally stopped sometime before dawn, leaving Dalton Creek wrapped in a strange fragile stillness beneath the fading night sky. Inside the trailer, nobody slept. Ethan remained seated near the front window watching the dark road beyond the trees while Rex rested beside the door, alert even in exhaustion. Lily sat curled beneath a blanket on the floor near the heater, the folded photograph still clutched tightly in her hands. Outside, the black SUV had not moved in nearly an hour. Its headlights stayed dark now, hidden beneath pine shadows at the edge of the road like a predator waiting for weakness. The old clock above the kitchen sink ticked softly through the silence. Then suddenly the SUV engine started. All three of them froze. Rex stood immediately, ears rigid. Ethan shifted closer to the window. Slowly, the vehicle backed away from the tree line. Snow crunched beneath its tires before the headlights turned once toward the highway and disappeared into the pale blue darkness of approaching morning. Lily stared toward the empty road in disbelief. They are leaving. Ethan kept watching another few seconds before finally lowering the curtain. For now. Rex relaxed slightly for the first time all night and walked back toward Lily, pressing against her side with a long exhausted sigh. The tension inside the trailer slowly loosened like a held breath finally escaping. Outside, dawn crept gently across the mountains. Frost shimmered along the pine branches while soft golden light touched the snow-covered valley below. Lily had almost forgotten mornings could still look beautiful. Ethan sat heavily on the couch, fatigue finally catching him now that danger had passed. The wound in his shoulder still hurt. She could see it in the tightness around his eyes. Yet something about him looked lighter than before. Less hunted. Lily stood quietly and moved into the kitchen. A few minutes later she returned carrying 2 chipped coffee mugs. Ethan accepted one carefully. Steam curled upward between them while Rex rested at their feet. You know, Lily said softly, staring into her coffee, Connor used to believe dogs were angels that forgot how to fly. Ethan glanced down at Rex. He may have been right. A faint smile finally touched Lily's face. Real this time. Small, but real. The kind that arrives slowly after years of absence. Morning sunlight spilled gently through the trailer windows, warming the faded walls and old wooden floorboards. For the first time in years, the place no longer felt like somewhere waiting to die. A few days later, Dalton Creek looked different beneath clear skies and fresh snowmelt dripping from rooftops. Ethan's shoulder had begun healing properly. Rex had regained strength quickly, his thick sable coat shining again beneath the winter sun. But the biggest change was Lily. She laughed more now. Not often. Not loudly. But enough for the silence inside the trailer to lose its grip on her. One afternoon Ethan disappeared for several hours without explanation. When he finally returned, he handed Lily a small envelope without saying a word. Inside was a letter from the bank. Paid in full. Her hands trembled violently as she read the words twice, then 3 times. Ethan, he shook his head gently before she could speak. A friend owed me a favor. Tears filled her eyes instantly. You did not have to do this. Ethan looked toward the mountains beyond the trailer window where sunlight glowed softly against the snow. Yeah, he said quietly. I did. A second folded paper rested inside the envelope beneath the bank statement. Lily opened it slowly. It was a business license application already approved for reopening her father's old roadside diner. Across the bottom Ethan had written only one sentence in rough, uneven handwriting. The world still needs places that feel warm. Lily covered her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. Rex walked immediately to her side, pressing his head gently against her knee like he always did whenever sadness appeared. But this time the tears were different. Not grief. Release. Weeks later, spring finally reached Dalton Creek. Snow melted into rushing creeks beneath bright Montana skies while pine trees swayed softly in warmer wind. On the morning Lily reopened the diner, Ethan sat quietly outside at one of the picnic tables drinking coffee while Rex slept beside him beneath the sunlight. Lily flipped the sign on the diner door from closed to open and looked out at them through the glass. Ethan raised his coffee slightly toward her. No speeches. No promises. Just 3 wounded souls who somehow found each other before it was too late. And in the quiet little town tucked beneath the mountains, life slowly began again.